Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Kaalia of the Vast, one of the OG Commander cards from the original direct-to-Commander decks. This is a Mardu 4-mana creature, 2/2 flyer, and it says whenever it attacks an opponent, you may put an angel, demon, or dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that opponent. And the creature is on the battlefield permanently, it's not temporary. So obviously the idea is to use Kaalia to cheat out gigantic angels, demons, and or dragons. So we want to get Kaalia into play as fast as possible, preferably giving it haste, and then cheat out huge bomb creatures that either combo to win us the game or are just huge threats that can kill our opponents very quickly. So before we get to the big creatures that we're going to assemble, let's go through the other things that we've got. So we've got our card draw spells in Esper Sentinel, Necro, One Ring, and Wheel. We've also got Faithless Looting because sometimes we're going to draw like these big dumb bomb creatures and we don't necessarily want to have them. We might want to have something else so we can filter them away with Faithless Looting or put stuff in the graveyard to reanimate. I'll get to combos in a bit. We've got Pyro, Red Blast, and Tybalt's Trickery as ways to counter our opponent's spells or protect Kaalia, as some fast mana to get Kaalia down faster. Then some haste spells, so Lightning Greaves is both protection and haste, Mass Hysteria, Hall the Bandit Lord, and Ashling's Prerogative so that we can attack with Kaalia the moment we play her. Bunch of Mardu lands, nothing much to say here. Some protection spells, so Kaalia doesn't get countered or killed by removal, so Defense Grid, Grand Abolisher, Deflecting Swat, Cavern, Lightning Greaves, whole bunch of ramp. Since we're playing a bunch of giant bomb creatures already, we may as well play some reanimation spells. So if we Faithless Looting a giant bomb creature into our graveyard, we can just reanimate it. Or if the creature just dies to removal or something, we can just reanimate it as well. A little bit of removal, Swords to Plowshares. We've got some Stax cards because Drannith Magistrate is going to be in pretty much every white deck. We've also got Drawn on Linvala and Linvala herself to shut off activated abilities of opponents' creatures, since most of our creatures don't have activated abilities anyway, and Armageddon, because once we get Kaalia down, we don't care about mana production anymore, since Kaalia alone can win the game. Fire Covenant as our sweeper, whole bunch of tutors, including Untomb and Unmarked Grave as ways of putting giant bomb creatures directly into the graveyard to reanimate them with our reanimation spells, and then a few other cards that weren't exactly in any specific category. So Ishin, Two Heavens is one. If a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time, so Kaalia triggers twice. And Sneak Attack as a way to put in giant bomb creatures, albeit temporarily, since we do have to sack them at end of turn. But this is just another way of cheating in giant creatures if we don't have Kaalia around, or just cheating in multiple giant creatures simultaneously, rather than just one at a time with Kaalia. So then we have a fairly decent amount of giant bomb angels, demons, and dragons, and we do need a fair amount of them because outside of putting them in the graveyard and reanimating them or, tutoring for them, we do need to have ways of always having, we need to make sure that we always have one of these big bombs in our hand so that we can cheat them in with Kaalia. So Ancient Brass Dragon, 7 mana, 7/6 flyer. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. When you do, put any number of target creature cards with total mana value X or less from graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, where X is the result. So average of 10 mana value, maybe more, maybe less. Ancient Copper Dragon, same thing, but instead you make treasure tokens. And then Ancient Gold Dragon, same thing, except you make 1/1 flying tokens. Then we've got Angelic Arbiter. Each opponent who casts a spell this turn can't attack with creatures, and each opponent who attacked with a creature this turn can't cast spells. Aurelia, to get multiple attacks. Now note, this triggers when Aurelia attacks, so it doesn't actually trigger when you put it into play with Kaalia, but the following turn it will trigger, and it'll untap Kaalia and let you take an extra attack and put in another giant bomb. So it's good on a delay. Avacyn, everything's indestructible. Balefire Dragon, when it deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls, so it's a one-player targeted sweeper, essentially. Cavern Horde Dragon, costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest number of artifacts an opponent controls. It's got Flying, Trample, and Haste. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. So it's kind of a big bomb dragon version of Dockside Extortionist. Then, of course, we've got Drawn on Linvala and Linvala. Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. 5/5 flying first strike. If a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage. And if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half of the damage rounded up. So It's basically a 10-10, and it makes all of your other damage sources bigger. It also makes damage sources from opponents attacking each other bigger, and it halves the damage on all of your stuff and you. Hellkite Tyrant, you steal all of your opponent's artifacts when it hits them. Also, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game, but that's not really relevant. Like, that's probably never going to happen. Mostly, it's just hit your opponent, steal all of their artifacts. Hoarding Broodlord is a tutor. Kaalia Zenith Seeker. ETB, look at the top 6. You may reveal an angel, demon, and or dragon card from among them and put them into your hand. So potentially up to 3 creatures off the top 6 cards of your deck. Master of Cruelties. It can only attack alone, but that's not relevant because Kaalia puts it in already attacking. So at least the first time around, it gets to attack for free. And then whenever it attacks a player and isn't blocked, the player's life total becomes 1. And then it assigns no combat damage, but that doesn't matter. So this essentially can one-shot a player that doesn't have a blocker. So if you attack a player with Kaalia and they don't have a blocker, right, then Master of Cruelties comes in, it reduces their life total to 1, and then Kaalia just kills them. But even if you don't kill them immediately, just reducing their life total to 1 is really good. And of course it has Death Touch, so if your opponent does wind up blocking it to not go down, it'll at least, at the very minimum, trade with whatever it's hitting. Ob Nixilis Unshackled. Whenever an opponent searches their library, the player sacks a creature and loses 10 life. So this is a way to heavily punish tutors. Then Rudescar Demon is a demonic tutor on ETB. And then we've got our big bomb combo demons in Razaketh the Foul-Blooded. Pay 2 life and sack another creature, search your library for a card. So pay 2 life, sack a creature, demonic tutor. It's also a big 8/8 creature. And Vilis Broker of Blood. Black, pay 2 life, target creature gets -1. Whenever you lose life, draw that many cards. So you can draw a ton of cards off of Vilis. And then finally, Sire of Insanity. At the beginning of each end step, each player discards their hand. So if you already are in a reasonable position with Kaalia, maybe you've already put out like one of these other big dragons or something into play, you can then slam down Sire of Insanity and then make everyone discard their hand and go Hellbent. So it's another card like Armageddon, where if you're already ahead on the board, you can just play this and seal the deal. And then specifically, our combos are going to be with Aggravated Assault and Razaketh. So Razaketh can go find any of our combos, and then Aggravated Assault is 5 mana, untap all creatures you control. If it's a main phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase, activate only as a sorcery. So if we have any way of generating at least 5 mana in combat, we can then activate this again and have infinite combat. And there's a few ways to do that. So Ancient Copper Dragon generates treasures. Obviously, it doesn't always generate 5 treasures because it is a random amount off of our D20, but on average, we should generate enough treasures that even if one of the rolls isn't 5, we're getting more than 5 on other rolls, so we should be able to go infinite with Ancient Copper Dragon. We can also potentially go infinite with Cavern Horde Dragon as long as the opponent that we're hitting has at least 5 artifacts, so we can generate 5 treasures. And there's just potentially other ways of doing this if we maybe have a way to loop Dockside, but that is going to be our primary combo. Mostly we're not a combo deck though. Mostly we're just all about getting Kaalia into play and then slamming down huge bomb creatures to kill our opponents. And that is pretty much what it's going to be. That is Kaalia of the Vast.